Hey everybody, welcome to another TLC conversation. Today we're going to be talking to a great group of panelists who are each responsible for starting or building or co-building or co-starting a excellent community that we all know and love. So we're going to talk to them all about that. But first, let's do some intros. Number one, boss man, Michael Helbling, co-creator and co-host of the Digital Analytics Power Hour. It's the industry's highest rated explicit analytics podcast. If anybody doesn't already listen to the podcast, you're totally missing out. It's a fantastic podcast co-hosted by Michael Helbling, Tim Wilson, and Mo Kiss. And he's been in the industry forever. He's an icon in our industry, helping to bring meaning and value to digital data since 2004. And he's my dear friend and boss and wonderful person. So we love you, Michael. Second up is Lee. Lee's the founder of MeasureChat, sometimes called the Measure Slack, which we're not supposed to say, but some people may know it that way. It's the MeasureChat. Honestly, Lee, I have to tell you, you've been my inspiration when we created the TLC Slack. Helbling actually said, hey, look what Lee's done. We can build a conversation around testing in a broader community for the TLC. And, we're tiny compared to your 8,000 members, but we're growing, and our Slack channel's now got about 300, but the group as a whole is 500, and hopefully someday we'll measure up to your MeasureChat. Excellent community. If you're not on the MeasureChat, I encourage you to join. There's a huge group of people all across the digital analytics space there, and optimization. So check it out. Third, we got Jim Sterne. I think everybody knows Jim. Hey, Jim. I just picked one thing, co-founder of the Digital Analytics Association, but I think we know that there's more than just one. Obviously, he's been around. He's one of the founding fathers of the industry, explaining business computers in the 80s, online marketing in the 90s, and then start moving into digital in the 2000s at its true conception. He's obviously co-founder and board chair for the DAA for the last 17 years. And his latest book on artificial intelligence for marketing is out now, so check it out. And last but certainly not least is Mr. Peter O'Neill joining us from London. Is that right, Peter? Yes?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Excellent.
Australian accent, but joining from London.
In the last 15 years. And he founded one of, if not the first, digital analytics unconference, the MeasureCamp, back in 2012. And it started just in the UK and then grew and expanded, and now it's all over the world, and including the US. So for those of you on the TLC that are in the US, multiple locations in the US, and growing and expanding. Some rumors around that there may be some more MeasureCamps coming near you. So if you haven't attended, there we go. Mel says MeasureCamp Austin coming in January.
Brilliant.
So everybody check out MeasureCamp if you're not already familiar with it, because it's an amazing experience. All right. So, and Tim Wilson says this weekend in San Francisco. Great point, Tim. So lots of great opportunities, lots of great communities. And I want to kick this off by asking each of you why communities matter. Why did you personally think that the community or the group or the conference, the podcast that you started or co-started, why did it matter? Why was it needed? And I'm just going to start, left to right on our group here, and I'm going to ask you, Michael, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off.
Sure. Well, I would start with just by saying I feel a little bit of a disadvantage on this panel because what we do is a little different, and certainly the communities formed by Peter, Jim, and Lee are so meaningful even to me in this space. So, but yeah, I don't know that we were out there trying to address a need. We were just trying to have fun and keep a conversation going, and then it just happened. So. I wish I had something more like totally thoughtful, like we were really addressing this cool need in the marketplace. But the reality we did see that there wasn't really at that time a really active analytics podcast for digital analytics. And so it just seemed like an opportunity. And so maybe that's what it was. The need was that there just wasn't a lot happening. The awesome thing is in the following years, a number of really great podcasts have started to cover this space. And so there's such great content now for digital analytics in the podcasting space. And so that's kind of cool to have seen that grown over the last 5 years.
And I would like to say that I think everybody on this panel would agree with what you just said about feeling like the Digital Analytics Power Hour has had an impact on them, because I know I would feel that way. So, fair. All right, how about you, Lee?
Yeah, mine started out almost as a joke. The first thing that this community kind of was missing was a sense of friendship. I think we all got our lives wrapped around, what we were doing day in, day out, looking at numbers, and we stopped thinking about the people that we could share those stories with, some laughs. So Measure Slack, we'll call it what it is, started out as a joke channel for people to talk smack. And in reality, what it ended up growing into is a way to introduce new people to the industry in an educational way to the realities of the business, not just the day-to-day effort. I got really tired of hearing about people saying, well, I'm doing this super cool thing. Nobody's ever done this, 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 and this. And maybe someone else has, and nobody was sharing it. And it got really disappointing to hear about these stories of cool things being done and no place to actually talk about it. And, I love conferences, but the simple fact is it's really difficult to get some of those great minds to come to conferences. And we needed a means to make that communication as simple as possible. And Slack just so happened to be the hot item of the week, and people had it installed. So I got lucky.
And it grew like crazy. How long did it take you to get to the 8,000 plus members you have today?
So shockingly, that number's out of date since I sent it to you. We're at 10,300. And it's taken 4 years.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And just shows everybody the value of the group. All right, how about you, Jim?
First of all, I want to take some credit for Lee starting the Measure Slack, because he was one of those people that I couldn't get to my conference because he kept working for vendors, and I had this thing where I want consultants and practitioners to speak rather than vendors. So I kept having to tell Lee no. And so I think maybe I prodded him a little bit into finding an alternative. You're welcome, Lee.
It's true.
So I started eMetrics Summit, now Marketing Analytics Summit, because I had gone to a couple of conferences where there was 1 or 2 sessions about analytics, and I thought it was the most interesting thing on the planet. Couldn't find anybody to spill the beans and explain to me how it all worked. So I put on a conference to get them all together so they would talk to each other and I could be a fly on the wall, which has been working for the past 18 years.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And what about the original Web Analytics Association, now the Digital Analytics Association?
That the audience created that. That was Brian Eisenberg and Andrew Edwards said, Jim, we are starting this thing. It was one of the breakout sessions, one of the roundtable discussions. Should we have an association? And if we did, what it would have looked like. It was a bunch of yellow stickies up on the wall, and
Yep.
and how do we do training? How do we do professional development? And then Brian and Andrew called up and said, okay, we're starting this thing, and you're gonna be with us, or we're gonna leave you behind. I went, wait for me.
No, I want to go. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Peter, MeasureCamp.
Yeah, I'm surprised Jim didn't try and claim credit for MeasureCamp as well, because it actually does relate back to him as well there. Because back in the day for eMetrics, he didn't want vendor speaking. He also didn't really want consultant speaking, which left me
just you.
with...
That was it, just you.
Could have been just me. Left me with what I thought were a lot of these great ideas I wanted to share with the world and no way of sharing it, which left the only possible solution if I couldn't speak at other events, other conferences, to create my own conference to allow me to speak. And that plus some beers, sort of how it sort of came about the first time. I actually, though, had been dragged to other unconference events, to a bar camp designed for targeting mostly developers, to a product camp for product managers, social media camp, social media people, even a tweet camp for Twitter people back 8 years ago. And I loved the energy and enthusiasm around these events, of people just sharing ideas quite freely, discussing things. And while conferences can be great, often the best discussions happen at lunchtime afterwards, back and forth. And these unconference events had that sort of energy in those discussions. And so it was an opportunity came about with a few people in London. I sort of talked them into it over those beers. And we had no idea what we're doing. We decided to run our first MeasureCamp back 7 odd years ago. And at the end of the day, which happened to have 130 people turn up to it somehow, asked the community, people there, like, do you want to do this again? And they went, yes, would love to. And so we had to keep on going with it. And about 3 years in, at lunchtime, some guys from Paris said, Peter, this is really fun. Can we do it in Paris? I went, I guess so, why not? Here's some guidelines to make sure it's still a community event, because that was always very important to me.
Right.
And it's gone from there. So it wasn't a deliberate, let's create a community. It was, let's give me a platform to speak. But it's sort of all come from that over time. And it's been amazing.
That's awesome. Well, at least in all of these stories that you guys have shared, even if you didn't see it as, hey, I'm going to build something for the community, that, the end effect of the communities, the conferences, the podcasts that you've built has been a huge addition to each of us in the community, in the industry as a whole. And obviously we've all learned from each other, although I guess it all goes back to Jim. So thanks, Jim.
Everybody, you're welcome. But I will speak on everybody else's behalf that none of us set out to build a community. We did a thing that we thought was interesting or valuable or important. And the audience formed a community. Yeah. And the first time you do it, you went, well, that was kind of fun. Let's do it again. The second time you do it and you see the same faces and you see that it takes on a life larger than yourself, then, turns out I'm a facilitator. I didn't know that.
Yep. What do you guys think what do you think we get out of communities? Why do we need them? What do we get from them?
Oh, I'll answer that, Kelly, but I want to do something really quick to piggyback on what Jim just said, because not only do I agree with what you said, Jim, but I would even go a step further and say, where I've observed people going to try to create communities on purpose, they almost always fail. Because if you go in with that intent, you don't have the right mentality or mindset for people to be able to join that. And then to answer your question, it's just all about validation for me, Kelly, is really why I seek that out. Yeah.
Or it's that, one of my favorite things that happens in those hallway conversations at conferences, and then as we started the TLC, the conversations that we had with the folks that had attended the conference afterwards, it's validation, but it's also therapy. It's also knowing that the same things you're struggling with, other people are struggling with, and hearing that and that you're not alone is pretty important.
Being a digital analyst used to be a pretty lonely existence. And so having a group of people who kind of knew the same thing you were struggling with, that it was a huge help. It propelled me in my career to know that it's like, okay, I get this. And it sounds like I'm on the right track. I can keep going.
I also think there's an economic issue for a lot of people in the industry outside of major markets, where they're not able to attend conferences. Maybe they are, in a university, they're studying some side version of what would eventually become analytics, and they're not able to invest 100% of their time, but they are interested in hearing about what the latest R script is, or they just want to hear what's going on with some new Google capability. And they don't have to be tapped in all the time, but a lot of times they're being forced into this all or nothing mentality. And I think that's partially where we're seeing success, where sure, you only get 2 weeks worth of content, but I can sit back and just kind of get this slipstream of information and enjoy it and tap into a conversation and, speak with someone like Simo Ahava, like, hey, oh my God, I have a question about JavaScript, and this god of GTM is willing to talk to me. Like, this is that access for a zero cost sum is amazing for a lot of people. And I know it's been, growing people's careers,
Right.
folks are getting new jobs. As unfortunate as it is, the industry is still 25 years odd in, still in its infancy, and more effort needs to be made to create those relationships, to elevate people's gains, and to show some sparkle in certain categories, so people don't feel like that we're the bastard children of the numbers world.
I think that speaks to the fact that this is the true value of the internet from the very beginning. The ability to reach out, the ability to say, I have this problem, whether it's technical or management or my boss. Has anybody else come across this? Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Oh, wait, there's people out there who understand what I'm talking about. And that is why the internet is so powerful. And then we want to meet in person because it's nice getting technical answers, but there's that feeling of community, that communing together that's really valuable. And then when you add MeasureChat on top of that, oh, we met at this conference 3 years ago. I remember this stuff. Let me ask you a question. That just all feeds on itself. It's lift all boats stuff.
Yep, absolutely.
And I find a lot of this sort of stuff is very universal across all the world from the events that I've gone to now. That everyone there does people said they do feel on their own quite a lot. They don't have the people around them. So going to an event, other people, similar field, similar issues, is great to start with. With MeasureCamp, it's a scary proposition at the start of each day because there is no sessions on the board. We don't know what's going to happen, who's talking, if anyone's talking, what sort of topics. And that does really concern people doing it for the first time. And we've been to places, Russia, Denmark, all around the world now. People going, it may not work here because Russians, Danish people, Romanians last year, they're shy, they're quieter, they're very reserved. They won't come out and speak.
Right.
But I've seen again, anywhere you go, it's sorted within minutes. Everyone, analytics, they all want to share their ideas and sort of speak quite freely. And then at the end of the day, a session I run quite commonly, I stole from someone else in London, did it first, is a therapy session where you get together, sit in a circle, and just one by one share a frustration you've got, which could be technical, could be a vendor, people in your team, anything else. And I've just seen people close to being in tears almost at the idea that they actually can share their frustrations with people who get it and really understand it. And that's what makes the whole thing, if I'm ever frustrated by it, there's members of people who are just incredibly appreciative, saying thank you, and just see how much it means to them, the fact they've been to the event, met their peers, discussed ideas, spoken for the first time in public, which is a massive deal as well. It makes a big difference to people. So that's great.
Absolutely.
And meet your spouse. I mean, hell, I met my wife at eMetrics. Thanks, Jim.
Jim gets credit for everything. I have to say, one of the other things that I have noticed is that a lot of folks in this industry tend to be, gifted, and gifted folks tend to have that imposter syndrome. And these communities that you all have created give people with imposter syndrome the opportunity to talk to others in the industry and really feel like they belong and that they fit, because they're asking questions that others are answering the way that they sort of intuitively were already leaning that direction, but they want that extra support. And so it actually combats the imposter syndrome a little bit and helps people take that step to go out on the MeasureCamp stage or eMetrics or Marketing Analytics Summit. That's not the right name. Jim, is that it? Marketing Analytics Summit, the new name?
Marketing Analytics Summit. Before we go, very well done. Before we go any further, we really do need to offer a tip of the hat to, if I'm the godfather, how about the grand old man, Eric Peterson, for starting the Yahoo discussion forum, for starting Web Analytics Wednesday, for being a force for community from the get-go. He was always the one who said, hey, we need to do this for us. And he started a bunch of stuff that we have all benefited from. So thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
And I actually just had a conversation with Eric. Like, we talk about the fact that MeasureChat is 10,000 odd people, but the industry has grown so much. The Yahoo group at one point had well over 3,000 people at a time when there were 6,000 possible people in the industry. 50% of the entire possible market was active in that group. When I don't know the addressable market today, but I'm sure as hell that 10,000 isn't even, 10% of it. So, I mean, he really did, grab a hold of that market and have an audience that was ready to listen and participate.
That's a great point. So obviously we have multiple groups, multiple communities that we're talking about here. Do you guys think it's important, and if you do, why, and if not, why not, to participate in more than one community? I mean, I know personally, I don't just attend one conference. I don't just listen to one podcast, and obviously I'm a member of multiple Slack channels, including the MeasureChat and the TLC. But that's me. What do you guys think? Do you make sure that you participate in multiple communities, or are you really focused in, your area?
Multiple communities,
What do you get out of that, Jim?
different frames of reference, an understanding of what is common between them. The beginning of this week, I was at a conference it's an association of companies that own old folks' homes. And like, why would you go there? Well, they invited me to come speak. That was easy.
Jim, you're not that old. Stop trying to prep.
You would be surprised. And I had, a chance meeting with Andy Crestadina. I had a chance to sit down for an hour and talk to him. Yay. But to listen to a room of 50 people in an industry I know nothing about, talk about trying to do analytics and seeing what's common across all industries is overwhelmingly valuable.
You guys agree?
Yep. I think people communicate in different ways as well. So where some people need the face-to-face interactions, other people want to sit behind a screen and talk that way. Or they are too remote, they actually can't get face-to-face. These are the way they communicate. So I think having multiple touch points and at different levels is really beneficial. It's like saying there is such a massive option to have a MeasureCamp plus a DA hub plus sorry, Jim, latest name again, marketing experience.
Marketing
conference.
Analytics Summit.
Sorry, I'm going to get it wrong again later on. The different styles. So MeasureCamp, it's 30-minute discussions, presentations. DA Hub is 1.5 hours, deep dive in a round table. You talk in different ways, you learn different things. There's scope for both there. And that extends to all different types of communities, I think.
Yeah, I definitely think it's multiple and mandatory to be that way. Because I don't think any one of these would, folks represented here would say, oh yeah, we definitely cover the breadth of it. Because, your experience on MeasureSlack is vastly different than if you were able to attend a MeasureCamp, which is going to be very different than if you attend a Marketing Analytics Summit. So even the audiences and the structure of those audiences will be different because they will appeal to different groups of people. And one thing that has become increasingly important to me, and it sort of hones in on this, is just in terms of how do we start to reflect a more appropriate representation within our industry of everyone who's in it, and how does that participating across a lot of these different groups and creating spaces and communities, how do we find ways to create more representation across those different platforms or communities? Because the reality is what appeals to one won't necessarily appeal to another. So by having a diversity of those things, we can hopefully start to achieve a diversity of people as well. A higher diversity. It's actually, we're improving a lot, but just look at our panel today. We got to keep pushing on that.
For sure. What did you guys struggle with when you were building your communities? What do you still struggle with? What failures did you have that you learned from? What did you learn from them?
All the failures, one by one.
Pick some important ones that we can learn from.
Well, putting on an event, the best description I've heard is that it's a reverse explosion. You have a billion pieces that are scattered all over the place, and you do your best to draw them all together, and it's a huge struggle. And then suddenly on one day, they all come together, and there this thing is. And anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And I guess the most important lesson is, as long as the audience doesn't know, it's okay.
Fair.
Have had various things go wrong behind the scenes. No one knows a thing. It's been great. So yeah, no one else knows. I think the biggest challenge for me is purely time. When MeasureCamp first started, I was more freelancing, working by myself out of the bedroom. I didn't have that much work on, could put heaps of time into it. It was great in that sense. Now I am trying to run a department of X number of people and expand different ways. I'd love to learn Python, be on Measure Slack more than once a week, if I had the time to do so. I just wouldn't have the time I wish I had to dedicate to MeasureCamp globally and trying to grow up more. It is why it does grow slowly in a way other cities. If I had more time, I could probably reach out and try and find the people to actually try and run in a city. Right now, it's whoever comes to me, and I try and give a little bit of help too. Ideas to run in the future, but we're not there yet. Biggest mistake, I've actually learned that MeasureCamp shouldn't go everywhere. That it needs to be of a certain sort of size to actually make it work and be a good experience to people. So now trying to push people, if they say, we want to do a MeasureCamp in this city, great, can definitely go ahead and do it. But first, are you running a Measure Bowling event? Are you running meetups? Are you doing other things first? Because if you haven't got that small critical
then you don't have the community
first, it's going to get 40, 50 people. It will be a lesser experience. So get the basics done first and then build up to a MeasureCamp and grow from there. So it's learning when to say no and also trying to learn to delegate to people have been some of the biggest challenges and learning experiences.
Michael, Lee?
Sorry, I dropped off there for a second. My internet dropped. So just trying to pick up off what Peter was just mentioning. Some of the concerns that we have with an audience of our size is everyone wants to try to steer the ship. And, at times we have a lot of diverse personalities who don't always like what's being said. So it is often a matter of being a kindergarten cop and teaching people to play politely in the sandbox. The other thing that we have a lot of strong opinions. Like, I want this channel. I think this is a topic that's extremely important to me. Please make this channel. There's nothing more important. And we have an FAQ on why we don't have thousands of channels, and it's actually fostered a lot of great conversation, kind of to the point that Peter was just making. Like, if we're not ready to, discuss a specific topic or cover a specific city, it's because there's just not enough traction yet. And we need to see that traction before we commit to it. We want people to come in and be engaged before we slice off a segment of our audience and commit to that. And it's really dangerous to have, potentially 100 different channels and someone not know where to post. It's a real threat for us. And we're already seeing cases where we create channels and they turn into a ghost town. It's really depressing because, it was a hot topic for 4 months and now no one wants to talk in there, and you then have one person post one message and they are, all question marks. Is this the right place to post? And maybe it is, but no one's ever going to go check it. And they're not getting the value out of it. Sometimes it makes you feel like a bad guy, being the person to say no so often, or to, drop the ban hammer. But at the end of the day, we've been able to survive by the pure fact that we've drawn a hard line from time to time.
It's interesting. Both Lee and Peter said that the thing that they've learned is the importance of saying no. Michael, how do you guys come up with the topics for the Digital Analytics Power Hour? And do you guys, so this kind of comes from Corey's question that he just asked in the calls channel on the Slack. Do you guys actively track how often a particular topic comes up in your individual communities, which I assume would lead to the creation of channels or the solicitation of topics for conferences, or in your case, solicitation or ideas for topics for the Power Hour?
Yeah, no, and so first off, we use our proprietary algorithm, which we call quintessentiality. No, just kidding.
Fair. So we asked Tim.
No, we kind of curate our own list of like, hey, this would be cool topics, and then Tim, as the most organized member, will rate that and then bug us all to rate what we think, and then from that we'll try to then align like who would be a good guest, or should we try to tackle this on our own. So and honestly, the way that comes is we're just looking to have relevant conversations. I will say we're in a much different place than the other panelists, in that we get to curate this and quote, we're able to do, what fancy words I love to say, like fix it in post, quote unquote, which is basically like we can make this work the way we want it to, as opposed to doing a live event or curating live conversations like the Measure Slack. So
yeah,
we're a little different in that regard. We do have this situation where, I guess PR firms are now getting savvy to podcasts, and so you get pitched quite a bit. And we have a great email that we send back saying how thankful we are that they would like to be on the show, and we'll definitely get back to them if we ever decide to cover that topic. I don't think at this point we have ever done a topic or a guest that's been pitched to us in that manner, though, because it's mostly the conversations we want to have, that may seem selfish, but I think it's because we're trying to still be authentically us. And so same reason we haven't done sponsorships at this point around this is because we haven't figured yet how best to maintain our voice in that context. So it's challenging, but yeah, from a topic perspective, we have people ask us about topics and we love to get that feedback. Like, I'd love to hear this topic. And sometimes stuff just becomes blazingly obvious that we've got to cover this in some kind of depth. And so, like, a great example, I'll give a little shout out to an upcoming episode in a little while. We just had recorded an episode with Corey Underwood from the Measure chat, talking about all these browser changes. That literally just because of Measure Slack, where Corey has been just helping tons and tons of people answer questions about this stuff, that we were like, we just need to get on and do a podcast episode with him and chat about this stuff, talk about this stuff. So yeah.
Awesome. What advice do you guys give to somebody who is trying to build a community? Say maybe a small group of 300 to 500 people that are talking about optimization. What advice would you give to somebody?
So this was a weird point. I was working at a company and I heard about another Slack team that was focused on developers, and I told them to get involved with another Slack group and try to cut out their corner of a specific channel or two within that Slack team and get traction.
Yep.
And then try to kind of bait and switch the team and say, I want to have more finite detail and perhaps, separate these channels out a little bit more. I'm going to create my own Slack team. And they did, and, they took it a different direction, and they've got one for every language and every APK, builds, and things got a little crazy and it got a little unwieldy, but they were able to steal a corner of an existing Slack team to start this, just to get approved and to get an audience, which is completely fine. I know there was some drama in the industry recently about, Adam Greco creating an advanced Adobe group that based around a couple people that were from Measure Slack, and Measure Slack is intended for a broad audience of people who are beginners to advanced in Adobe Analytics solutions. If he wanted to go create a more advanced group with specific skills, that's fine. You could talk to the people in in the Adobe channels, and then go create a separate Slack group just for people that you've pre-qualified. There's nothing wrong to give people the opportunity to have multiple places to talk about varying degrees of specific topics. It's the internet. It's, a very wide range of topics. You're not, it's not a breakup. Like, they can still come hang out in multiple places at once.
And do.
Your feelings shouldn't be hurt if someone's going to cheat on you by 2 Slack teams. But it's a great opportunity for my entire goal, which is to have a smarter industry by having people more engaged.
I think you just nailed exactly the best advice, which is you're doing it for the greater good. So the analogy to another Slack team is another conference. If there's going to be another conference, I'm going to support it because it's better for the industry. This year, one of my best achievements ever is that the Digital Analytics Association is putting on its first big annual conference, the ONE conference in Chicago in October. And so I have successfully created my own competition. To me, this is a huge sign of success. And if there's going to be other ways that this community is going to communicate or meet or help each other, I'm going to support it. And if the idea is, oh, I'm going to carve off this little piece over here and use it to make money, that's going to fail.
Yeah, reinforcing that, Jim has been incredibly supportive of MeasureCamp from day one, in terms of actually, almost in a way, letting us go ahead and doing it and encouraging it from the very start. And then actually attending a couple, and I think surprising himself, actually they are quite enjoyable as well, more than he thought they would be.
Oh no, I always knew they would be. It's just a little more advanced. The Measure camps tend to be more technical than I can handle. But when I go to one, like the last one I went to was Bratislava, right up my alley, great group, a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. But so what they were saying, I think the big thing for me is to not have too much control of it. You have to let go of it for it to work. If you can try and control it too much, you're trying to control people, things will go wrong somewhere. You do want some boundaries, some guidelines, but then trust in yourself, trust in your own community to actually work out. If you're doing good things, the right things, and for the right reasons, doing it for love, for passion, not for money, people recognize that and will come back to you. So the more you give away, the more you get back in return.
Yeah, I spent a little bit of time thinking about some of this stuff because I was like, I need to probably make sure I can contribute to this panel some way. And the thing that always sticks out to me as sort of a core component of what a community needs to try to be able to grow successfully is generosity. If it wasn't for the generosity of people spending their time with me in a lobby bar at an eMetrics conference early in my career, the inspiration for the Digital Analytics Power Hour would have never occurred. if it wasn't for the generosity of people like Simo Ahava and Corey Underwood and Tim Stewart, who are like the top contributors to the Measure Chat, that community would not be as vibrant as it is. If it wasn't for the generosity of folks traveling to a city on a Saturday to attend a Measure Camp and then pitch their time and effort to share what they've learned to the broader community, Measure Camp wouldn't be what it is. And if it wasn't for the generosity of Tim Wilson putting up with me for all these years, we wouldn't have the Digital Analytics Power Hour either. And so the other thing that I would say is, as you do get into it, be kind to everyone, but don't expect to please everyone. And that's hard. It's hard because you feel like you've let people down. We had a comment on our blog that's associated with the show, where someone was basically told us, wow, really great content, but it was just really sad that you found it necessary to use profanity in your podcast. And it was like, well, I don't know what to say back. It's part of the brand. I mean, it's gonna happen. So you're not gonna make everybody happy, and you've got to have a certain sense of like, yeah, I'm gonna have to let that go if that happens. But you don't be mean about it. Yeah, and we do have the very cool and tough-looking E for explicit in iTunes. Thank you, Corey, for bringing that up on the channel.
It can be pretty heartbreaking at times. I mean, I've had people write me that like, it's fantastic they've gotten their job or contract through, Measure Chat. But I had just a LinkedIn message the other day that like, I've spent all my time in, university. This is what I'm most passionate about. By you not having a channel that covers this topic, you are limiting my ability to be successful, and my thoughts cannot be shared. And, you're really limiting people of my ilk, and it's, negative this, negative that, negative this. And it's like, dude, I get it. But at the end of the day, hey, I've got a Measure channel. Go try to plow your own, field over in that channel and do what you can. And maybe you'll grasp a couple people, but this is about a community. It's not about an individual. And unfortunately, you're not going to make everyone happy. And for the first couple of years, I felt really bad. I actually took a lot of the insults personally. But after a while, you have to look. There are people who are posting, thousands of messages a year, taking time out of their day, taking time out of their work, things that they're being paid for to contribute to the industry and make it better. And I'm sorry you're not getting what you want one time. For years, Jim knows this, I thought Jim was a jerk because he wouldn't let me get on stage because I had a vendor badge. And I took it really personally. But at the end of the day, Jim drew the line and said, I want practitioners and I want consultants, except for Peter, to get on stage and, share their story. And that's a hard line that had to be drawn for the best quality for what Jim was delivering. And I don't blame Jim for it. It was the right thing for the business.
Well, you don't blame me now, so at least we got over.
No, and I'm actually trying to create something to give you more people to speak at your conferences. So I'd appreciate a little love back. But that's a separate topic, Jim. Maybe we could have a separate TLC about it.
I'm emulating your style. That's my first start.
TLC, a place for healing.
But at the end of the day, you are going to break a couple legs really, really bad, and you're going to get some smack laid down on you. But none of the groups here are talking about a group of 50 people. We're talking about hundreds and thousands, and for the greater good, you have to kind of eat that crow.
Do you guys think it's easier to build or create these groups, these communities by yourself? Is it easier to do with a partner? What are the challenges of each?
I don't think you can do it alone. I think that's the whole definition of community.
You can't create the content yourself.
Yeah.
But so for Measure Chat, I'm a bit of a control freak, and I watched what happened to Twitter, and I watched what happened to the Yahoo group, and I watched kind of the spam that came in. And I have advisors that kind of keep me from bending around the nail a little too far, because when people are mean, my natural reaction is to tell them to go pound sand. So people like, Helbling, I'll go to him and be like, I really want to just punt this person. Should I or should I not? And Helbling will be like, okay, reword it so that you don't feel like you're attacking their family. But for the most part, every single person that gets into Measure Chat is individually audited by myself. So of the 10,300 and change, all of those people are one-on-one. I do the investigation. So I should be able to recognize their name and their LinkedIn profile and what I found about them, because I want to put the trust of that community on my shoulders.
So as somebody that's only managing 500 people, I know how hard that is. How in the world did you do it with 10,300?
He does not sleep.
Wow.
It's a trade-off, I think. I mean, it's great in a way if you can do it yourself, because you have total control. You can set the boundaries. You know what's going on, and you can make it work the way according to your vision of it.
Right.
But time's a limiting factor. It's easier if you are sort of a freelancer, you've got spare time, reputation. When you've got a family or a bigger job, it's harder and harder. You have to learn to delegate the work out and trust others will keep to your vision as well, even without you being there. I think it's easy if you can find a partner, someone to work with who has a similar vision, life becomes a lot easier.
Right. I have to give credit where credit's due, Michael. When I started the TLC 7, 10, I don't know how long ago it was now, it was a community of people who attended a conference and wanted to keep the conversation going. And we never grew past the 20 some odd members that were there until I came to Search Discovery and talked to you about the community. And you said, why make it invite only? Why not open it to everybody? Make it for everyone. Create a Slack group, and why not have the conversations on Zoom? And in the period of 2 years, we went from 20 to nearly 500. So, I'm one of the people, I may be the only, admin, the owner, the person that's doing it, but it wouldn't be what it is today without the input that I got from you and from others.
Well, Kelly, I really appreciate that, but all I do is observe other people and then attempt to copy. So what I saw happening on Measure Slack was essentially the advice I gave to you, which was, hey, you've got this community, let the community interact with each other, like I saw what Lee did with Measure Chat. So yeah, thank you, but I did not do anything innovative.
It actually sounds like one of the best techniques, things I've actually learned from Jim, is when someone comes to you with a great idea, you say, that is amazing, brilliant idea. You go away and do it. It makes your life so much better at that point in time.
It's a great point. Let me ask you guys, how do you find is the best way for you to communicate with your different communities? I mean, obviously, Lee's kind of this is a softball for you. I'm assuming you're going to say via the Slack. But what about, what about the rest of you? Or how are you communicating? Are you communicating to or communicating with? What formats do you find is most effective? How do you get the best response?
There's 7 questions in there. Communicate to is Twitter, LinkedIn, all the outbound stuff. Communicate with. I'm an email guy. I live on email. When I go to other conferences, it's a face-to-face thing, and I'm at my best doing that. Going to an online forum, Slack channel, is I'm not as strong there. the conversations like MeasureCamp tend to be more technical, more specific, and I'm more management strategic. So that's not my best method of reaching or communicating with people. But that's why I like going to so many conferences, because I like sitting down with people in the lobby bar and having those conversations. But then email is forever going to be the stalwart of the internet, I think, for communication.
That's just made me realize in a way that I actually haven't created a community myself. What I've created is a method for other people to create their own local communities, because I can't communicate to the people who are attending MeasureCamp San Francisco, MeasureCamp Berlin. I have no control over that at all, besides a little bit on Twitter, and that's a little bit of broadcasting, not much there. Because you've got a community in San Francisco, community in Berlin, and other sort of cities, and it's all organized by the local people. So what I need to do, when I'd love to do more of it, is to find the incredibly passionate people in each city around the world, and they are the ones who are actually creating the community, not me. I've just given them the framework and the method of doing so, which they can reuse, rather than actually creating a community directly myself.
Yeah, I trust on brand ambassadors, basically, people who are engaged. When I read a blog post and they mention, and this topic came out here, and they link to the join page, and that's all the work that needs to be done. I let them do the marketing, for me, as far as communicating, like, hey, Patreon and things like that. Just post it in the lobby bar or Measure channel. I still like to pretend I know something, so every once in a while I'll chime into a specific channel. But for the most part, there's enough people that are communicating on my behalf that I let them do their thing. And there's no bad press. So what's the worst someone could say about Measure Slack? After 20,000 messages, we lose content. Okay, read more often. I'm sorry, but it's going to cost $100,000 if you don't want that.
Yeah, right. Okay, 3 minutes to go. I'm going to give you guys a chance. I would like you each to very quickly share with everybody what communities or events you don't want to miss, if you can help it, that are not your own.
DA Hub.
DA Hub, excellent.
Super Week.
Oh, yeah.
Excellent.
I was like, is it just one? Because I could do
Yeah.
You can do as many as you want.
Because I will definitely echo Super Week with Peter, and then also the DAA's one conference.
I've never been to Super Week, and it kills me every year that I haven't made it. So I'm relegated to MeasureCamp, but I've been to MeasureCamp in multiple cities now, and everyone is more impressive than the last.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, guys. You've been wonderful. I'd like to give a chance for everybody on the line to say thank you to these wonderful people who have built so many wonderful things for us in the community. You've made us all better and smarter and given us a wonderful place where we can find each other, learn from each other, and share what we've learned. So thank you all very, very, very much.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
All right. Really quickly, our next conversation, November 1st, is going to be around sharing results, and our own Valerie Kroll is going to be sharing her presentation from actually multiple conferences now around the best ways of doing that and sharing results and not losing people along the way. So the invite will be coming out soon, and the recording from our first ever live panel that we did a couple of weeks back at the DA Hub is now up and live on the TLC YouTube channel. So check it out and subscribe, and see you in early November. Thanks, everybody.